This is Blake Thornhill, and Russia's industrial sector is facing mounting pressures that are reshaping the country's economic landscape. From railway debt to refinery damage, from labor shortages to supply chain disruptions, multiple sectors are experiencing significant strain. Today, we're going to cut through the sensationalism and look at what's actually happening on the ground in Russia's economy, backed by verifiable data and credible sources. This isn't about dramatic predictions or apocalyptic scenarios. This is about understanding the real economic challenges facing one of the world's largest countries and what it means for global markets, energy supplies, and geopolitical stability. Let's dive into the facts. Let's start with Russian Railways, or RZD, which is indeed facing its most significant financial challenges in recent years. According to Reuters reporting from December 2024, RZD's debt has grown substantially, reaching approximately 3.4 trillion rubles, which converts to roughly 32 billion British pounds at current exchange rates. The company, which is Russia's largest employer with over 700,000 workers according to official statistics, has seen its financial position deteriorate due to several converging factors. The Moscow Times reported in January 2025 that freight volumes have declined, though the exact percentage varies by cargo type and route. Why is this happening? The shift in trade patterns following Western sanctions has required massive infrastructure adjustments. Russia has been attempting to redirect trade flows from European markets toward Asian markets, particularly China. However, according to analysis from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Russia's eastern rail capacity was not originally designed to handle the volume of freight previously destined for Europe. The Trans-Siberian Railway and supporting eastern routes require substantial upgrades to accommodate increased traffic. Bloomberg reported in late 2024 that these infrastructure limitations have created bottlenecks, particularly for bulk commodities like coal and timber. The Financial Times noted in January 2025 that RZD is seeking government support to manage its debt obligations. This is significant because the railway system is critical infrastructure in Russia, where vast distances and limited highway networks make rail transport essential for both freight and passenger movement. For workers, the economic strain is real. According to official Russian statistics, inflation has been running between 7 and 9% in recent months, while wage growth has not kept pace in many sectors. This squeeze on purchasing power affects millions of Russian workers across various industries, not just railways. Now let's turn to Russia's critical energy sector, which has faced unprecedented challenges since the escalation of the Ukraine conflict. Ukraine has conducted numerous drone and missile attacks on Russian oil infrastructure throughout 2024 and into early 2025. These are documented facts, though the exact extent of damage requires careful analysis. According to Reuters and Associated Press reporting, multiple Russian refineries have been targeted in Ukrainian strikes. The Institute for the Study of War has documented attacks on facilities including refineries in Ryazan, Tuapse, and Novochakhtinsk, among others. These strikes have had measurable impacts on Russia's refining capacity. S&P Global Platts reported in late 2024 that Russian refining throughput declined by approximately 7 to 10% compared to the previous year, though seasonal maintenance also plays a role in these figures. The key point is that Ukraine's strategy has been to target Russia's ability to process crude oil into usable products, particularly fuel for military operations. What about the economic impact? The International Energy Agency noted in their December 2024 report that Russian crude oil exports have remained relatively stable at around 7.5 to 8 million barrels per day, but refined product exports have faced more significant disruptions. This distinction is important because refined products typically command higher prices than crude oil. Western sanctions have complicated repairs to damaged facilities. According to the Wall Street Journal, restrictions on technology and equipment exports have made it more difficult for Russian refineries to source certain specialized components, particularly advanced control systems and catalysts used in modern refining processes. The domestic fuel market in Russia has experienced supply pressures. The Moscow Times and Russian business publication RBC reported temporary fuel shortages in some regions during 2024, with prices rising above official guidelines in certain areas. The Russian government responded by temporarily restricting fuel exports to stabilize domestic supplies, as confirmed by statements from Russia's energy ministry. However, we need to be precise about what this means. Russia has not experienced total collapse of its fuel sector. The country still produces and exports significant quantities of oil and gas. What we're seeing is strain, adaptation, and inefficiency rather than complete system failure. Bloomberg reported that Russian refineries are operating, but at reduced capacity and with longer maintenance cycles than normal. The military-industrial sector tells a complex story of adaptation under pressure. According to analysis from the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, based in London, Russia has depleted significant portions of its Soviet-era equipment stockpiles since the war began in February 2022. Open-source intelligence analysts, including Oryx and researchers at Jane's Defense, have documented over 9,000 confirmed Russian equipment losses through photo and video evidence. These include tanks, armored personnel carriers, infantry fighting vehicles, and artillery systems. Russia has been drawing on storage facilities to replace these losses. The International Institute for Strategic Studies reported in their 2024 Military Balance Assessment that Russia has increasingly deployed older equipment types, including T-62 tanks from the 1960s and BMP-1 infantry fighting vehicles from the same era. This indicates that newer equipment is either being conserved or is not available in sufficient quantities. The sanctions regime has created significant challenges for Russia's defense industry. According to research from C4ADS, a nonprofit that tracks illicit networks, Russia has increasingly relied on components sourced through third countries, particularly China, Turkey, and Central Asian nations. The Wall Street Journal reported in late 2024 that Western microchips, sensors, and other electronic components have been found in recovered Russian military equipment in Ukraine, despite export restrictions. These components reach Russia through circuitous procurement networks designed to evade sanctions. China has become a critical source of dual-use components. According to Carnegie Endowment analysis, Chinese exports to Russia of goods that can have both civilian and military applications increased substantially in 2023 and 2024. This includes machine tools, electronics, and chemical precursors. However, the quality and reliability of these alternative supply chains present challenges. Reuters reported in October 2024 that Russian military bloggers and some soldiers have complained about equipment reliability issues, particularly with electronics and communications gear. While these are anecdotal reports, they align with assessments from Western intelligence services about Russian supply chain stresses. The Economist reported that Russia has ramped up defense production despite these challenges, with some estimates suggesting military production increased by 30 to 40% in 2024 compared to pre-war levels. But this increased production is coming at significant economic cost and requires repurposing of civilian industrial capacity. One of the most significant but least understood aspects of Russia's wartime economy is the dramatic shift in labor markets. According to Russia's Federal State Statistics Service, Rosstat, unemployment hit record lows of around 2.4 to 2.6% in late 2024. Now, in normal circumstances, extremely low unemployment would be a sign of economic strength. But in Russia's case, this reflects a labor shortage crisis. The Moscow Times and business outlet Kommersant have reported that Russian businesses across sectors are struggling to find workers. Why is this happening? Several factors are converging. First, military mobilization has removed hundreds of thousands of working-age men from the civilian labor force. The BBC Russian service and independent outlet Meduza have documented that while official mobilization figures are limited, the actual number of Russians serving in Ukraine likely exceeds 500,000. Second, emigration has played a significant role. According to research from the Association of European Businesses and analysis in the Financial Times, between 500,000 and 1 million Russians, particularly educated professionals in tech and finance, left the country in 2022 and 2023 following mobilization and economic uncertainty. Many have not returned. Third, Russia's defense industry is operating at high tempo and drawing workers from civilian sectors with competitive wages. Bloomberg reported that defense factories are offering salaries 50 to 100% higher than civilian industries in some regions, creating wage competition. The result is widespread labor shortages. The Central Bank of Russia acknowledged in its economic outlook that labor constraints are a primary factor limiting economic growth. The Institute of International Finance estimated that Russia faces a labor shortfall of approximately 4 to 5 million workers across various sectors. To address this, Russia has significantly increased foreign worker recruitment, particularly from Central Asia. According to Radio Free Europe, work permits for foreign citizens in Russia increased substantially in 2024, with workers from Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan making up the largest groups. The Wall Street Journal reported that some Russian regions are even recruiting workers from India, particularly for construction and manufacturing roles. This represents a significant shift in Russia's labor market composition. For wages, the picture is mixed. Defense sector workers and those in high-demand fields have seen real wage growth. But many public sector workers and those in declining industries have seen purchasing power erode due to inflation. The World Bank estimated real wages in Russia grew modestly in 2024 overall, but with significant variation by sector and region. Let's look at how these pressures are affecting everyday Russians in civilian sectors. The automotive industry has undergone dramatic transformation. When Western manufacturers, including Volkswagen, Renault, and others exited Russia in 2022, it created a massive gap in the market. According to the Association of European Businesses, Russian car sales dropped by nearly 60% in 2022. However, they partially recovered in 2023 and 2024 as Chinese brands filled the void. Automotive News Europe reported that Chinese manufacturers now hold over 50% of Russia's passenger vehicle market. But there are quality concerns. Consumer reports in Russian media and on social platforms have documented issues with Chinese vehicles, particularly related to cold weather performance and parts availability. The Russian edition of Forbes noted that service networks for these new brands are still developing. The aviation sector faces perhaps the most acute challenges. When Airbus and Boeing ceased parts deliveries and maintenance support following sanctions, Russia's civilian airlines were cut off from their primary suppliers. According to Aviation Week, Russia operates predominantly Western-built aircraft, with Boeing and Airbus planes making up the vast majority of major carriers' fleets. Reuters reported that Russian airlines have resorted to cannibalizing parts from some aircraft to keep others flying, a practice known as aircraft on ground or AOG management. This reduces fleet size and raises safety concerns among aviation analysts. Russia has attempted to accelerate domestic aircraft production, but the timelines are challenging. The Sukhoi Superjet 100 and the newer MC-21 aircraft programs have faced delays and certification issues. Flight Global reported that production rates remain far below what would be needed to replace retiring Western aircraft. The result has been reduced connectivity within Russia and internationally. Schedules have been cut, some routes eliminated, and ticket prices have increased. For a country as geographically vast as Russia, reduced air connectivity has real economic and social costs. Consumer inflation has been another pressure point. According to Rosstat, official inflation was running at 7 to 9% through much of 2024, but independent economists suggest actual price increases for food and basic goods may be higher. The Central Bank of Russia raised interest rates multiple times in 2024, reaching 16% by year-end, to combat inflation pressures. Social spending has come under pressure. The Carnegie Endowment noted that Russia's federal budget has been reoriented toward defense spending, which consumed over 6% of GDP in 2024, according to government budget documents. This leaves less fiscal space for social programs, infrastructure investment, and economic development. Now, here's what's critical to understand. Despite these significant challenges, Russia's economy has shown more resilience than many Western analysts initially predicted. The International Monetary Fund estimated Russian GDP growth of approximately 2.2% for 2024, exceeding earlier forecasts. How is this possible? Several factors are at play. First, energy revenues, while below peak levels, have remained substantial. India, China, and Turkey have become major buyers of Russian crude oil, often at discounted prices. The World Bank noted that Russia's current account surplus remained strong through 2024 due to continued exports. Second, the defense mobilization itself has created economic activity, even as it distorts the civilian economy. Government spending on military production creates jobs and demand, even if this is economically inefficient in the long term. Third, Russia has adapted to sanctions more effectively than initially expected. The use of alternative payment systems, trade in currencies other than dollars, and procurement through third countries have allowed Russia to maintain some international economic connections. The Atlantic Council documented these sanctions evasion networks in detail. However, and this is crucial, short-term resilience doesn't mean long-term sustainability. The Institute of International Finance and other economic research organizations have noted that Russia faces serious structural challenges. Investment in civilian infrastructure and non-defense industries has dropped. Technological isolation from Western partners will have compounding effects over time. The Bloomberg economics team noted that Russia is essentially consuming its economic seed corn, using reserves and Soviet-era stocks to maintain current operations while underinvesting in future productive capacity. This works for months or even a few years, but creates long-term vulnerabilities. Now let me break down what this really means and why it matters beyond Russia's borders. First, we're watching a major economy fundamentally restructure in real time under conditions of conflict and sanctions. This is historically significant. Russia is the world's 11th largest economy and a major commodity exporter. Its economic choices ripple globally. The strain we're seeing in Russian industry has direct implications for global energy markets. Even with reduced refining capacity, Russia remains a critical oil and gas supplier. Any further disruptions could affect global prices, which affects your costs at the pump and heating bills. Second, the labor shortage dynamic is creating an interesting situation. High defense spending and labor scarcity are pushing up wages in some sectors, which paradoxically improves living standards for some Russians even as the overall economy becomes less efficient. This helps explain why domestic opposition to the war has been more muted than some Western observers expected. But here's the key point. The current situation is not sustainable indefinitely. You can run an economy hot for a while, burning through reserves and old equipment stocks. But eventually you need investment in new productive capacity. You need technology upgrades, and you need economic efficiency. Russia is trading future capacity for current military output. Third, the increasing dependence on China is reshaping Russia's strategic position. When you rely on another country for critical components, from microchips to machine tools, you give that country leverage over your decisions. This shifts the global balance of power in ways that are still unfolding. What about global implications? The reconstruction of Ukraine will require enormous resources, whether that happens during or after the conflict. Russia's economic capacity will be a factor in any negotiated settlement. A weaker Russian economy might make compromise more likely, but it could also increase desperation and risk-taking. For the Russian people, the picture is complex. Some benefit from high defense wages. Others face inflation, reduced services, and uncertainty. The social contract between the Russian government and citizens is under stress, though how this plays out politically is unpredictable. The bigger picture here is that we're seeing the economic costs of major power conflict in the 21st century. These aren't World War II-style total mobilizations, but they're not small-scale operations either. The economic dislocations are real, and they're affecting millions of people. So to recap the key points, Russia's railway system faces significant debt and operational challenges as trade patterns shift eastward. Energy infrastructure has been damaged by Ukrainian strikes, creating refining bottlenecks and domestic supply pressures. The defense industry is drawing on old equipment stocks and relying heavily on imports through third countries, particularly China. Labor shortages are widespread as mobilization and emigration remove workers from civilian sectors. Consumer industries from automotive to aviation are adapting to sanctions with mixed results. Yet despite these challenges, Russia's economy has shown more resilience than initially predicted, though long-term sustainability remains questionable. What's your take on this situation? Do you think economic pressure will force a diplomatic resolution, or will Russia find ways to sustain this indefinitely? I want to hear your informed perspectives in the comments below. For more in-depth analysis on global economics and geopolitiks, head over to my blog at blakethornhillblogspot.com, where I break down complex issues with verified sources. If you found this analysis valuable, hit that subscribe button for daily news coverage that prioritizes facts over sensationalism. This is Blake Thornhill, bringing you the truth. Stay informed.